Should we start the session, sir? A very good evening to all the participants and our esteemed speakers and guests, and welcome to the webinar on transaction on net zero for the sustainable future and leasing professional opportunities by ESG Research Foundation. Today we have with us very esteemed speaker and guests, Dr. C.A. Rashmi Ainapur, Mr. Rajesh Bhalla sir, and Ms. Pooja Sharma. I would first like to introduce Mr. Rajesh Bhalla sir to tell us about ESG Research Foundation. He is the CEO of ESG Research Foundation. He is former Additional Secretary of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He is highly experienced professional with over 38 years of experience. I welcome him, sir. Welcome him. Thank you, sir. Namaskar, sir. Over to you. So you are on mute.
Good afternoon, friends. I will just give you a brief about our organization. This ESG Research Foundation is a not-for-profit organization dedicated to promoting the significance of environmental, social, and governance aspects in business operations within the public and private sectors. We conduct various activities, collaborates with corporations and regulatory bodies, support organization implementing their ESG plans. By working together with government bodies, public and private sector businesses, and societies, we strive to facilitate the achievement of India's ESG and climate-related goals. The Prithvi Awards, along with Global Conference on ESG, is a part of our ongoing efforts to promote ESG awareness and support organizations in their ESG initiatives. Last year, the Prithvi Awards, followed by Global Conference, was organized on 14th and 15th July 2023 at Hotel Shangri-La. This two-day event was focused on sustainability aligned with environmental and social governance consideration. 23 sustainability icons from different categories, corporates, PSUs, NGOs, startups, self-help groups, and individuals were honored with this prestigious Prithvi Awards, which was decided by the eminent jury members based on nominations received under various categories. This year also, we are organizing this prestigious Prithvi Awards in September, and we will be notifying the details very soon. To fulfill our missions, we provide comprehensive support throughout an organization's ESG journey, covering the entire value chain from initial assessment to policy setting, implementations, and reporting. We offer end-to-end solutions tailored to our clients as per their requirements. Beyond these core activities, ERF also endeavors to make a lasting impact through various activities by organizing webinars, conferences, and training programs specialized in ESG, fostering capacity building and knowledge sharing among diverse stakeholders. The ESG Research Foundation has collaborated with Ramanujan College, University of Delhi, and launched an online recognized course on fundamentals of ESG and sustainability. The first two batches of this course were a huge success, wherein about 6,000 participants were enrolled from banks, PSUs, corporates, etc. And we have also launched a basic level course for school level titled ESG and Sustainability Literacy. Continuing our efforts, the ERF has engaged more than 100 counselors across India for spreading ESG and sustainability literacy and to inculcate the seed of sustainability among the students, being the youth and the future of the nation. So this is a brief about our organizations. So now over to Juhi ji for further proceedings.
Thank you so much, sir, for informing us about the ESG Research Foundation and all the courses that have been running under ESG Research Foundation. Now, I would like to invite our esteemed speaker for today, Dr. C.A. Rashmi Ainapur, primarily specialized in sustainability reporting. Rashmi ji is an ESG GRI 2021 standard certified professional, BRSR certified from ICAI, certified GRC professional, and has completed sustainable investing certification from Harvard Business School. I welcome her on behalf of all the participants. Welcome, ma'am, and you may start the deliberation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good evening to all. And I firstly thank ESG Research Foundation for giving me this wonderful opportunity. Special thanks to CA Atul Kumar sir and CA Rajesh Balla sir for giving me this opportunity again. Thank you, sir. So without any delay, we'll start with the session.
Please.
One second. Now it's visible, no? Screen is visible?
Yes, ma'am, it's
Yes,
visible.
please.
Okay. So once again, good evening all, and I'm Dr. C.A. Rashmi Ainapur. Today, let us discuss about the concepts of net zero, carbon markets, and CBAM. CBAM stands for the cross-border transactions, and it is specially directed towards European Union carbon border adjustment mechanism. It is in much of news now, so it's a good initiative by ESG Foundation for taking up this topic for the seminar. So today's agenda will be covering on the concept of net zero, and we'll be understanding the key elements in the Paris Agreement. We'll be touching upon carbon markets. In carbon markets, there are two types of markets, voluntary market and mandatory markets. We'll try to understand with examples and how it is affecting in India and also in a global perspective. Then comes the EU CBAM. Then we will also discuss about the career opportunities in this area for the professionals. And Q&A, I think it will be in the end of the session. You can post your questions in the chat box. So net zero. What exactly net zero stands for? So daily in the newspaper, we read about carbon neutrality, carbon emissions, net zero. So what actually net zero stands for? As the name itself suggests, net is what? There has to be one positive element and one negative element. And being financial professionals, we always are fascinated about positive and negative, right? So let us try to decode what net zero actually means. Before that, we will understand the key elements in Paris Agreement. So this is one significant climate agreement which was entered by 196 countries in 2015. The reason for Paris Agreement was to cut the temperature or the emissions because the temperature globally is rising. So it was to curtail the global temperature rise. So the goal or target of Paris Agreement was to achieve net zero by 2050 globally. It is not for one country or a continent, it is globally. So, few key elements let me touch upon to limit the temperature rise by 1.5 degrees. So, it is for the coming decades. By 2050, it is not that every year 1.5 degrees Celsius. And increase ability to adapt to climate change. We are feeling the heat. This summer, the heat is more, but we are able to adapt. But there are few countries, it's not only the heat, but also the extreme cold weather. Because of the climate change, there is extreme cold weather in few regions of the globe. So to adapt to that climate change, all the countries have to come together. So in Paris Agreement, the one key point which I liked was, and which is a welcoming point, which was liked by everyone, was it was urged by the UN that the developed nations have to help the developing nations. We speak about limiting the temperature increase, but how much of time and resource, especially the financial help, is needed by the countries? If we take developing nations, example India, in our 5-year plan or the budget, what will be the prior thing? It will be eradicating poverty. That comes as a priority. People don't have food to eat. So limiting the temperature, obviously it will be next in the agenda. So to overcome this problem, the Paris Agreement, it specified that the way we have our CSR goals or CSR funds to be invested towards community or climate, each country, other countries, the developed nations, they do also have some funds which has to be allocated to CSR activities. So they have to invest in the Eastern countries or the developing nations. So that expenditure will also be considered when they are making their financials. This was agreed upon. That is what the next point tells: make finance consistent and aligned with the agreement goals. So this is the reason, if we see in last 5 to 6 years, there are many NGOs which are getting floated in India and Africa and many other developing nations because of this thing, where they are routing their CSR funds and they are investing in these countries. In a way, it is helping the overall globe, the Paris Agreement, and that is what the main essence is, because we have only one planet and only one atmosphere. Then one side they will be spending on to adopt to the climate change and to introduce newer renewable sources, renewable source setup or afforestation and all those things. And also on the other side, we have to increase the forest area to capture GHG from the atmosphere. So this was the key elements of Paris Agreement, which gave rise to net zero target. So let us understand what net zero actually means. So as I said, there has to be one positive and one negative. Here, positive is emission of CO2. Emission of CO2 accounts for positive element that occurs because of burning of fossil fuels and deforestation. Because of this, the CO2 and GHG increases in the atmosphere. And the negative is removable by sinks or afforestation. So when the positive and negative, there is compensation, there we achieve net zero. We will be understanding the concept clearly in the coming slides. So if you can see the graph, it is clearly showing that we have already spoiled the atmosphere, and it is our responsibility, each nation's responsibility, each industry responsibility, and on a lower scale, each company's responsibilities and individual responsibility to take care of the emission. So as I said, this is a direct air capture machine where you can reduce the CO2 and GHG in the atmosphere. It is still under construction. Many innovations are taking place, many upgradations are taking place, So if this happens directly, it can capture CO2 and GHG from the atmosphere. That will result in negative CO2 in the atmosphere. So there will be summits which will be arranged every year to discuss on the progress compared to the previous summit, or whether we are in alignment with the Paris Agreement. So COP26 is an important summit. Recently COP28 happened. It spoke about climate financing. This was related to building grid, energy grid. Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Prime Minister Narendra Modi jointly launched the Green Grids initiative, which they called One World, One Grid. So this is how, though we are divided by LOCs, we are again united by the sustainability. So net zero target, as I told you, in Paris Agreement, it was agreed upon that we may reach by 2050 through the collective efforts of all the nations, developed and developing nations. But when they track the progress, individual countries, only United States and Japan, they can achieve it by 2050, Russia and China by 2060, and India, we can achieve by 2070. So let us understand the carbon markets now. As of now, till now, we have discussed about net zero, where what is the positive component and negative component we have understood. So now let us understand what carbon markets stand for. So carbon market is a system that puts a price on carbon emissions, creating a financial incentive for organizations to reduce their emissions. For example, I have a manufacturing unit. I'm just taking an example of 10 tons of emission. So 10 ton is really less number, but 10 ton of emission. So beyond the permissible limit. So that for that 10 ton, there will be a pricing. So companies or individuals can use carbon markets to compensate for their GHG by purchasing carbon credits. So about carbon credits also we'll understand in detail in voluntary and mandatory market, but following the same example. So if 10 tons of carbon dioxide is emitted into the atmosphere by the company, then it has to purchase the equal carbon credits to compensate that emission. So one tradable carbon credit is equal to 1 ton of CO2 emission or equivalent GHG gas. So 1 ton is equal to 1 credit, which means I said 10 tons of emission, that is equal to 10 credits. We have to purchase 10 credits to compensate. Here the emission is 10 ton, that is the positive element. If I am purchasing the credit of 10 credits, there I will be achieving the carbon neutrality or carbon net zero. So the carbon market sets a price on carbon emissions. So companies can purchase carbon credits to reach their carbon neutrality or net zero journey. And the carbon credit price will be fixed by supply and demand. The way the stock market operates, even the carbon market will start operating like that. Now there are only international players. So Government of India is planning to introduce CTS, carbon trading system, which will be starting from 2025, and there will be lots of changes in this area. So enforcement mechanisms such as penalties for exceeding emission limits. As I said, if we are crossing the limit, permissible limit, that is in our example, it was 10 tons. So for that 10 tons, it is kind of penalty because each carbon credit has a value attached to it. So here there are two types of market. One is mandatory market and one is the voluntary market. So let us try to understand what mandatory market means. So here, if you can see, this is company A and this is company B. So this line is the cap. This is called as cap and trade system, which is not yet introduced in India. by 2025, all these systems will come in place. So this is the cap which is fixed by the government, and company A, it is emitting excess. This is the excess GHG emission, and company B, it is well within the cap. This is the cap and it is well within the cap. Here what happens is the company B, which is emitting within the cap, it will earn the carbon credits. And here company A, which is above the cap, it has to purchase carbon credits to compensate its carbon footprint. So how they get credit? For this, there are regulators, government or regulator, which will fix the cap. And there are the markets, carbon markets. There, the carbon credits are listed. From there, company A will buy and compensate its carbon footprint. So then what is voluntary market? So mandatory market is government is fixing a cap of what the emission should be. That will be fixed based on the product and the industry they are operating in. Next comes the voluntary market. For example, we have a solar energy or a wind energy or a agriculture which is being taken place through organic farming without use of any chemical fertilizers. When that is the case, there the carbon credits are automatically generated because they are not harming the environment by releasing excess CO2. So they're voluntary, there are some credits getting generated. This can also be listed on the carbon exchanges and it can be traded. And there are also types of certificates where based on the project, as we all know, we have 17 sustainable development goals. So each project will be directed towards few goals. When it is directed towards 1 or 2 SDGs, the rate of carbon credit will be different, carbon certificate or whatever it is called. And when it is directing towards more SDGs, then that will be called as the premium carbon credit. So types of carbon markets, one is the cap and trade system, that is what the mandatory market. Then is the voluntary carbon market, and this is the carbon tax markets. This is what we will discuss in EU CBAM. Then the concept of carbon offsets, which allow companies to compensate for their emission by investing in environment projects that reduce carbon emissions. This is what happens when we try to reduce our carbon footprint. There is increase in the projects which are environment friendly. This will help in a long run sustainable climate retention. Once we are achieving net zero, but that has to continue. Because of these penalties, we invest more in environmental projects. For example, if we are taking afforestation, once the trees are planted, once it is planted, so they grow and that value will be fetched over many years. Carbon credits represent a specific amount of reduced GHG that can be traded in the carbon market. Hence, it plays a very crucial role in the sustainable living and environmental protection. So these are the key players in carbon markets. Government bodies, which gives the mandates, regulates and releases protocols, policies, procedures. And there are financial institutions which will facilitate the trading of carbon credits and provide the financial instruments in the market. And there are corporate players where they will purchase or sell to meet their own industry goals. So these are few examples of top carbon exchanges. So CTX, ACX and TOP and Expansive. And soon even our India will be having a carbon trading exchange. So innovations in carbon markets. We all speak about carbon credits and all, but they have to be monitored. There has to be integrity because everything is in electronic form. So the integrity should not be compromised. There has to be transparency and efficiency in carbon trading. Since technology is involved, and use of location-based services and geofencing in the agro projects. This is used, and the blockchain technology is used where the carbon credits are kept in a form which is not compromised, and development of new market mechanism. The way we have derivatives in the equity, we do have derivatives in carbon markets, and also not only carbon credits, plastic credits are also increasing. So the opportunities in carbon markets is when it is concerned with the organizations, they can meet their CSR, and overall for the sustainable living and the environment protection, and potential financial gains through the carbon credits and like purchase and sale in the exchanges. So this is how Indian carbon market will look like. This is the newspaper cutting where you can just see the growth of carbon market or the potential what we can see once it is introduced. And whatever being introduced in India, it is in line with the Paris Agreement. So Bureau of Energy, Power and the Climate all put together, they are planning to start the ETS, CTS system, that is the carbon trading system, and carbon credit certificates under CCTS are expected to be available for trading by 2025. So as we can see, it's a collective journey, and as an individual and organization, we are also required to support this scheme. So in this, the conclusions and takeaways, finally, what I can tell is carbon markets surely play a crucial role in managing the carbon footprint. Companies can leverage carbon markets to monetize environmental efforts, because many companies, when they are opting for sustainable practices, it is a kind of incentive what they get. When they get carbon credits in the process, it's a kind of incentive that will make them the urge to create more sustainable practices in their organization. And as I said, financial gains through trading carbon credits and offsets, and government regulations and international agreements continue to shape the evolution of global carbon markets. So when we speak about CBAM, we will also see how international treaties, the free trade agreement and all, whatever we have with countries, that is also having impact on the carbon market, that also we'll touch upon. So any doubts till now, can I take up, or at the end of the session, it's up to the participants. I think I can see Q&A. Jui, can I take up now for this session, and the second part, shall I take up later, or how it is?
Ma'am, you can take the question now
I
if you
think-
want. There's one question in the Q&A.
Yeah.
So you can take it now
Okay.
as well.
Okay. I think nothing. They are asking to continue with CBAM.
Okay. All right, ma'am.
I think
Then
it
you
is
can
better.
take the
You
questions at
continue,
the end.
madam, you continue
Yeah,
with your
I will.
presentation, then later on we'll take.
Done. So CBAM stands for Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, that is by the European Union. So why EU CBAM is of that much of buzz and in news is because the stringent policies what EU is implementing on their domestic suppliers, because they want to achieve net zero by 2050, and they have one more package called as Fit for 55, where they want to reach that by 55% by 2030. So 2030 means it is very near. So by 55% they want to reach that target. That is the reason they are becoming more with stringent, they are putting more stringent rules on the domestic suppliers. Because of that, the in-house supply or the cost of raw material is increasing. So what the domestic suppliers or the production houses is doing, they are planning to import from the countries where they are getting cheap raw materials, where there is carbon leakage. This is what is called carbon leakage. In the foreign country where they're not following the sustainable practices or they're not using the renewable energy, Obviously, the cost of raw material will be cheaper compared to EU. This is how the people are importing into EU to curtail this, because there is carbon leakage. Obviously, everyone will start importing. To curtail this problem, they are planning to introduce. Actually, they were planning to start it from October 2023, but because of too much of opposition from all the countries and the importers, it is been postponed to 2025. Most probably from January 2026, each nation, whoever is exporting to EU, has to follow this procedure. So, EU started its ETS, that is Emissions Trading Scheme, long back, which is in 2005. So they covered around 40% of EU GHG emissions, where only large industrial and electricity plants were supposed to follow this, and carbon leakage addressed via free allocation of emission allowances. So as we discussed cap and trade system, in EU, it is called as free allocation of emission allowances. There they have fixed the cap. Here we tell that we get carbon credit if we are below the cap. There it is called as free allowances. So, and sector outside EU ETS is around 60%, that is buildings, transport and small industries and agriculture. And member states of national measures, 8 member states have national carbon taxes. That is their internal mechanisms. Then EU climate goals, as I said, in 2019, first climate neutral continent. By 2050, they want to reduce carbon emission by 55%. That is what they called as Fit for 55 package. So slowly what they are doing is they have introduced EU ETS, which is Indian cap and trade system. Then slowly the free allocation they want to phase out, because if they tell now that you should not emit at all, industries will shut down. So what they are doing is initially they are just fixing certain amount of emission which is acceptable, which is in the permissible limit, and later on they want to eradicate or curtail that free allocation that will be phased out. So prevent carbon leakage to ensure it is in accordance with the EU climate policy, CBAM is introduced. See, within EU, it is EU ETS, and for the member states, it is EU ETS. So when it is coming to third countries, that is what they call. The second countries is their member states, and the third countries, for example, India, China, and all these things. So their CBAM is introduced so that they are on the uniform level. So CBAM is an essential part of EU climate target and not the protectionist measure. Why they're calling CBAM as not a protectionist measure is there was a lot of debate and opposition by the third countries, because what they thought was EU wants to stop import in the country. They want to completely stop because there is free trade agreements between some nations. So what is the use of that agreement then? This is how the debate started, and whether it is approved by WTO. They cannot say that, they will impose the tax. And CBAM, it will range from 20% to 35%, and it's a huge tax rate. Obviously, it will affect the import of all the nations. I think around 30% of Indian exports goes to European unions. So, and that will have a major impact on the economies. So is CBAM needed? Is it really needed? Global climate challenge requires urgent action. Time for action is now. So because of the Paris Agreement, because of the net targets, EU has taken it so seriously that it is kind of climate ambition for them. They want to achieve it by 2030 is their first stage, and 2050, they want to become complete carbon neutral. If they want to do this, they want to wipe out the differences in climate ambition among EU trading partners, and CBAM prevents carbon leakage to ensure there is uniformity and effectiveness. So incentivize third country producers to reduce emissions. When this carbon tax is introduced or CBAM regulation is introduced, obviously the people who are exporting to EU will start reducing emission so that they are not penalized, and they will be adopting green policies, which in turn will have a long-term impact. CBAM has a strict climate objective. These are the key elements. So CBAM favors decarbonization efforts in third countries. So deduction of explicit carbon price paid in third countries from CBAM obligation, actual emissions methodology. They are releasing the methodology like based on the industry we are operating in. There is a methodology how to calculate the CBAM, and countries linked to EU ETS will be excluded because already they are complying with the regulations. Possible international agreements on how to take account of carbon price. See, for example, in India, we have carbon credits. So is it like, again, I have to purchase CBAM. So there has to be some uniformity. This carbon credits should be accepted there. So all these things will get a proper picture maybe by 2025 or early 2026. CBAM does not preclude continued joint work on international coordination of carbon pricing. That is how there is coordination between nations when they are fixing the price for carbon emissions. So addressed to companies, not countries. So many are telling that, what is the use of free trade agreements, as I said. So what they're telling is we are not targeting any countries. We want to take imports from the countries, but we want them to be carbon neutral. We don't want carbon goods into our country because we have our own goals. So it is not at all targeted to any country. So based on actual verified carbon emissions embedded in the imported goods, focus on goods in carbon intensive sectors. So only few sectors are notified as of now. So a regulation mirroring EU ETS carbon pricing to the extent possible. So it will be in accordance with the EU ETS system only. It is not a tax. It's not a customs duty. So it is just to reach our climate objective and compliant with WTO and in line with the international trade rules. So what types of goods are covered in CBAM? They are selected on 3 criteria. One is high risk of carbon leakage, covering major part of carbon emissions under EU ETS. Already under EU ETS, there are certain commodities, all those will be covered. Major part will be covered, and practical feasibility to calculate embedded emissions in goods. It's such a Herculean task to calculate the embedded emissions because there are types of gases which are used in the process, and it becomes so difficult to calculate the emissions. In practical scenario, when we are calculating where we don't get the conversion factors, we depend on the molecular formulas to get a proper picture so that we can calculate the embedded emission. So there has to be some practical feasibility. Only then that can be part of CBAM. So first phase, goods within limited number of sectors, goods defined by CN codes. That is the common nomenclature codes. Further stages following review post 2025. So it will be extended to other sectors in EU ETS. So these are the sectors, goods in the following sectors: iron and steel, aluminium, cement, fertilizers, electricity and hydrogen. So next, the transitional period in 2023 to 2025. See, they wanted to introduce in 2023 itself. Because of the opposition, they have called 2023 to 25 as a transitional phase. There will be reporting. There is a difference here. For 2 years, they will be reporting. There will be CBAM reporting. But they will just report on the amount of emission. But there is no need of paying any tax. So that, in that 2 years, the exporters and importers both will understand what is their carbon footprint, and they will start adopting the renewable resources, and they can do their life cycle assessment of the product, and they can fix their own targets. So the final period from 2026. So this is the transitional phase. CBAM goods imported to EU from 1st October. Report by each quarter. First report at latest by 31st January. No verification of emissions. And methodology and criteria for penalty in implementing the Act. Report submitted to EU Commission via the transitional registry to gather data for forthcoming implementing acts for definitive period. So learning by doing period for business. So whose responsibility is this? To report by each quarter. So it is the responsibility of the EU importer. Suppose from India, I'm exporting some goods. Even I will be having the access to the registry, but it is the responsibility of the EU importer to take care of the CBAM reporting. Goods can only be imported to EU by an authorized CBAM declarant. This will start from January 2026. Importer has to be establishing in a EU member state. Authorization by CBAM authority. So application possible from 31st December 2024. There has to be yearly declaration of CBAM imports during the calendar years. By 31st May 2027, submit CBAM declaration for imports during 2026. So there they issue the CBAM certificates based on the embedded emissions, and it's the duty of the importer to file the report and buy the credits. There they call it as CBAM credits and to offset the carbon emission. And non-compliance will result in penalties. So this is the definitive period 2. So here we can clearly understand what CBAM certificate stands for. One CBAM certificate equals to 1 ton of embedded emission, which is same as 1 carbon credit is equal to 1 ton of embedded CO2. Authorized CBAM declarants buy at common EU auction platform. See, one CBAM certificate will have certain price. That will be on the auction platform. So price is equal to average weekly price of EU ETS allowances. Upon purchase, CBAM certificates are registered in account of authorized CBAM declarant. No trading allowed between other authorized CBAM declarants. So all these things, I will share this slides with you so that you can have a look. These are from the Ministry of Finance, Sweden. So the main essence here is it is similar to our carbon credits. So this is where the doubt was arised in many of us, whether our carbon credit, if I have carbon credit in India, is that acceptable? Is it equal to CBAM certificate? All these are questions now. So maybe that will be answered in 2025 ending or 2026. So role of third country producers, for example, it is India for us now. All legal CBAM applications, obligations on EU importer, not on third country producer. Here, it is the duty of the importer, EU importer, to oblige with all the obligations. A third country producer, as I said, he may register contact information and activity because he should also be aware of what is happening. So, and activity in the EU CBAM registry to facilitate contacts between importers. The third country producer shall ensure verification of embedded emissions. So, I'm done with the session. Can I take up the questions now?
Sure, ma'am, we can start taking the questions.
Okay. How can we share this government initiative to school students? Sir, you want to answer this, sir?
Ma'am, I believe.
Yes, madam.
yes,
So
sir.
I
Yeah.
think that the question is very vague. They are telling how can we.
So you're on mute.
So, madam, this question is very vague. That they are asking how can we share this government initiative to school students. So actually the initiative of ESG is maybe is talking about that ESG initiatives to schools.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I may refer that already I have mentioned in my brief about our ESG. We have already taken these initiatives. We are
So mute You're on mute again, sir, somehow.
We have engaged more than 100 counselors all over the country, and they are approaching the schools to give them the sessions. And we are giving presentations and awareness program to our schools for their teachers, university level. So this is an initiative already we have done, and we have mentioned about the schools details at our website. So this maybe he may like to ask this only. So already
Yeah.
this initiative is already on. Thank you.
So from which year has SEBI mandated ESG compliance for all listed companies? SEBI has mandated BRSR for 1,000 listed companies, but ESG is completely different compared to BRSR. ESG is a wider aspect, which is also called as a sustainability report, which is based on GRI and IFRS. So it is not for all listed companies. It is for 1,000 listed companies. BRSR is mandatory, and top 250 companies limit the reasonable assurance for the core aspects of BRSR is necessary. EVs are reducing perceptible carbon footprint instead of fossil fuel chargeable. However, the raw material for these batteries entails mining, which itself causes environmental and ecological imbalance. So how is this being studied, calibrated? Yeah, this is a good question. That is what happens. We say that better shift to the renewable energy and better shift to EVs, but the batteries used, they discharge a lot of emission. So the invention is going on in that field as well. So it takes time. How much is India prepared in this direction? As I said, India, it is forecasting that by 2070, we will be carbon neutral. And I feel by the introduction of CTS in India, by end of 2025, we will be having lots of mandates, and there is a lot of opportunities in this field. Because when I started my PhD, it was just for 100 companies, listed companies, BRR, it was called as business responsibility report was necessary. It was mandatory, but now it is 1,000. It will not take much time when it will extend to all the listed companies, and there is a lot of opportunities in this field. In regard to the future of carbon trading system in India, will there be potential for private players to operate exchanges, or it will be only through the government? Now, already there are many private players, so they need to have proper blockchain technology in place to get the status, and they will be tied up with many exchanges, because I think only one government regulated exchange will not be able to take up all the works. There will be many private players involved, though finally the mandates or the certificates will be issued by government, but there will be help needed by many private players. CBAM is EU regulations. Do country like India will also have some regulations like CBAM? Yeah, this is really nice question. Actually, always we are on the complying end. That is what we feel. We are so liberal that we accept everything, whatever is put in India. But when we go to other countries, we need to face so many challenges. Yeah, hopefully, maybe by 2025, we will get a great clarity in this regard. Is Government of India going to put cap for carbon emissions on industry? If yes, when? Yeah, by 2025. That is what I said about cap and trade system. Only in cap and trade system, that is equal to EU ETS. After that, I think cap and trade system will also be there for 2-3 years, and that will also be phased out. My question related to CBAM, who pays CBAM tax? Yeah, CBAM tax will be paid by the importer only. So what happens is he will increase the price. So that will make a challenge for us whether we have to export to that country or no. Obviously, it will be included in the price what we pay. So they will pay less to us. So that is how it will become unattractive for us. Whether carbon credit is available for companies in India? If so, which authority awards these credits? So Verra is the registry where we can get the carbon credits, but there are many other players who are on the technology front who will help us to generate the carbon credits. Where do you where do you as CA stand? So I take this question as the opportunities for CAs. So if that is the case, I feel in the area of sustainability reporting and ESG reporting, when it comes to assurance or due diligence practices, we can be part of it. Even in the preparation, we can be part of it. And not only that, as a CA, that credibility what we carry, we can enter into all the areas and help our clients.
I will also add on, madam, on this.
Yeah.
That IFRS, that IFAC and IFRS, they have already suggested their models under S1 and S2. So that is very, very beneficial to CAs for further opportunities on ESG field.
Yes. I think, yeah, is there a simplified formula to calculate GHG emissions? Yeah, we do have some Excel sheets available online to calculate the GHG emissions, where we have the conversion factors which are released by DEFRA, and there are many agencies which release on timely basis. But what challenge we are facing when we are preparing the BRSR report for our clients? What we are facing is many conversion factors are not available in that Excel sheet. That is where I said, based on the molecular formula of certain gases, the technical team works on that and they fix the conversion factor. It may appear simple when we see the Excel sheet. Okay, I will just key in the value of the process or the gas or the fuel what I'm using. But not all the factors are available. Does ESG net zero cover only carbon emissions? I'm not able to see this question once. We have net zero target till 2070, but still there is no clarity to calculate carbon emission, that is emission factors or methodology in single website. How will be possible without a public awareness? Yeah, that is what it is, not only challenge to India but for everyone. This is not that simple subject to calculate the emission. It will create some problems, but since we are still in the transition stage, it will happen over time. Scope for green credits and current status. So green credits is, can you just elaborate this question? Does ESG net zero cover only carbon emissions? EVs are, okay, this I think I answered it. Okay, can you please share some insights into how global financial ecosystem is warming up to sustainable investments? Yeah, sustainable investment has become so much of importance, where though the short-term return is less, but in long term, there is lot of return. So globally also, if we take sustainable investing is taking a leap growth, I can say. So thematic investing, what we call as thematic investing, has become more popular. So when I was doing my course, mostly the funding agencies where the funds are from the retired people and all these things, they urge to that fund managers, please invest in the thematic investments where they are directed towards the sustainable development goals. So again, it is the mindset of the investor where you want to invest. So there are many people who want to do their investing in the thematic investments. I think I've covered all the questions.
Yes, ma'am. All the questions which were in the Q&A box have been.
Yeah, one last question I can see. In India, most of MNC companies doing the environmental critical operations through contractors or suppliers, which fall under scope 3. And by doing this, they escaped through investment, and also scope 3 not comes under their responsibility. Some regulation there in India. Yeah, scope 3, there are 3 emissions, that is scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3, as it is rightly mentioned by Mr. Sanjay. Scope 1 and Scope 2. If we see in BRSR also, we are reporting on Scope 1 and Scope 2. Scope 3 is not yet mandatory. But slowly everything will come into picture, because if we see value chain partners assurance is required from 2026 and 27. So that time we have to touch upon Scope 3. Then we will touch upon the carbon neutral products. There are many organizations now that are telling, I want carbon neutral raw material. Even in India, many organizations, larger organizations, they are stressing on carbon neutral raw materials. So this is happening, this has started, and there will be a lot of changes in coming years. So what is blended finance? I didn't get this. If they can elaborate on this, I can answer. Or else I can take in a way like, blended finance is maybe it is a positive screening, what I can tell. Thematic investment is like only when the activity of organization is pointing towards sustainable development goals, and blended finance is the positive investment where they are using the sustainable practices along with the commercial business operations. So that is also there. I think that's also, I don't see any other questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Rashmi ma'am, for giving such a wonderful deliberation and answering all the questions of the participants. It was a very knowledgeable session that we had today. Now I request Mr. Rajesh Bhalla sir to give a vote of thanks. So I welcome him again, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Juji. So on behalf of this ESG Research Foundation, I convey very hearty thanks to our directors and founders, CA Dr. Atul Gupta ji and CA Deepak Batra ji, for this wonderful initiative. I am also thankful to Dr. Rashmi Ainapur ji for this wonderful presentation, and I am sure, I am confident it is very helpful, and the participants who have participated in this webinar, naturally their knowledge and skills have been upgraded related to this ESG perspective. I am also thankful to the participants for making this event a great success. And I also thankful from my office, Juhi ji and Pooja ji, for all these efforts and having a grand success for this event. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you once again for giving me this opportunity. And I thank all the participants for their patience listening, because I know this topic is like, it goes overboard, but they were very interactive. Getting so many questions itself is a privilege for a speaker. And I thank Juiji for beautiful coordination, and Pooja also for timely reaching us and all. So thanks again.
And we will also be having one more this webinar in April. So maybe we will be notifying soon about the date and timing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashmi ma'am. Thank you, Raj Bhalla sir.
Thank you so much.
Ma'am, for your time, and thank you all the participants for joining in. You all have a lovely evening ahead.